On a cold November night in Dayton, Ohio, neighbors along Elm Street were jolted awake by the sound of sirens and the glow of flames tearing through a modest family home. Firefighters battled to contain the blaze, fearing someone might still be inside. Their worst fears were confirmed. Amid the scorched wreckage, 2 bodies were found, a man and a woman, each gruesomely impaled with swords, the steel glinting eerily in the firelight. The Dayton Police Department arrived quickly to take over the scene. The male victim was identified as Thomas Green, 39, a warehouse worker known by many on Elm Street. The woman, however, was a mystery. No ID, no immediate ties to the home, and none of the neighbors claimed to recognize her. Who was she, and why had she been there that night? One thing was clear. This was no random act of violence. Detectives worked fast, knowing that whoever committed these murders had gone to great lengths to cover their tracks. Setting the house ablaze was calculated, a way to destroy evidence. Lead investigator Detective Carla Monroe told reporters, "The level of violence we've seen here is disturbing. We believe this killer is dangerous, and we're working tirelessly to ensure they don't strike again." But with no suspect in custody and an unidentified victim, fear spread quickly down Elm Street. For the residents of Dayton, the nightmare was just beginning. As detectives combed through the ruins of the Elm Street home, they discovered something chilling. The fire had been deliberately set, using gasoline as an accelerant. This wasn't just murder. It was a carefully staged cover-up. Investigators focused on Thomas Green's background. He had no known enemies, no criminal record, and was described by co-workers as quiet and hardworking. But phone records revealed late-night calls to an unfamiliar number. One traced back to a woman believed to be the second victim. Her identity remained a mystery, but the calls hinted at a secret relationship. The Dayton police received a tip from a resident who had spotted a suspicious vehicle parked near Elm Street on the night of the fire. It was an old Chevrolet Impala, dark blue, with a dented bumper. Detectives canvassed local gas stations and traffic cameras, eventually catching the Impala on footage just blocks from the scene. The driver appeared to be a man in his late 30s, though his face was obscured by a hoodie. It wasn't much, but it was the first solid lead. Forensic specialists worked tirelessly to identify the female victim. Dental records and fingerprints finally gave detectives a name: Rachel Miller, 34, from Cincinnati, Ohio, nearly an hour's drive from Dayton. Further digging revealed Rachel had recently separated from her husband and had been seen visiting Dayton multiple times in the weeks leading up to her death. What was Rachel doing in Thomas Green's house on Elm Street? And why had both of them been murdered in such a brutal way? Detectives began to suspect that this was more than just a crime of passion. Something darker was at play. Detectives turned their attention to Rachel Miller's estranged husband, Daniel Miller. Recently divorced, he had a documented history of violent outbursts. When investigators learned that Daniel drove a blue Chevrolet Impala matching the description given by witnesses, alarms went off. But when questioned, Daniel insisted he hadn't been near Dayton the night of the murders. He claimed to have been staying with his brother in Cincinnati. The alibi was shaky and investigators pressed harder, convinced he was hiding something. Still, they needed more than suspicion. They needed proof. While reviewing phone records, detectives uncovered a disturbing twist. Not only had Rachel been in frequent contact with Thomas Green, but Daniel Miller had also exchanged threatening messages with Thomas just weeks before the murders. One text from Daniel read, "Stay away from her. You don't know what I'm capable of." To detectives, it painted the picture of a jealous, vengeful husband, but the brutality of the killing, swords, fire, and the staged crime scene suggested more than just domestic rage. It pointed to planning and possibly help from someone else. As evidence piled up, investigators began to suspect the crime might not have been carried out by Daniel Miller alone. Forensic analysis of the crime scene revealed footprints of 2 different shoe sizes near the back of the house. This raised a chilling possibility. The murders on Elm Street were not the work of one man, but a partnership in blood. Dayton police had to consider that they weren't just chasing a jealous ex-husband. They might be dealing with serial killers working together. Just as detectives were zeroing in on Daniel Miller, a disturbing revelation shook the investigation. Surveillance footage from a gas station near Elm Street didn't just capture Daniel's blue Impala. It also revealed another vehicle following closely behind, a marked police cruiser. When investigators traced the cruiser, it was assigned to Deputy Mark Turner of the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office. At first, Turner insisted he was patrolling the area that night, but further digging revealed something sinister. Turner had been friends with Daniel Miller since high school, and the two had reconnected weeks before the murders. Detectives now faced the unthinkable. A law enforcement officer might have helped carry out the brutal Elm Street killings. Armed with phone records, GPS data from the cruiser, and a pair of bloody gloves found in Turner's garage, investigators moved in. Both Daniel Miller and Deputy Turner were arrested. In interrogation, Daniel broke first. He admitted to luring Rachel and Thomas together at the Elm Street house, driven by jealousy and rage. But he claimed the sword killings and the decision to burn the house were Turner's idea. Turner, on the other hand, denied everything, insisting he was only trying to help a friend through a hard time. But the evidence told a different story. Turner's fingerprints were on one of the swords pulled from the scene. The arrest shocked Dayton. A deputy sworn to protect had become an accomplice to murder. The trial of Daniel Miller and Deputy Mark Turner became one of the most watched cases in Ohio history. Prosecutors painted a chilling portrait of two men bound by jealousy, betrayal, and bloodlust. Daniel Miller was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole. Mark Turner, the deputy who betrayed his badge, was convicted of murder and conspiracy to commit arson, receiving a life sentence as well. In the aftermath, the Dayton Police Department faced heavy scrutiny for missing early warning signs about Turner's behavior. Policies were reformed, with stricter oversight on officers' personal associations and mandatory psychological evaluations. For the people of Dayton, the fire on Elm Street was more than a double homicide. It was a reminder that evil can lurk where you least expect it, even behind the badge. And for those who lived on Elm Street, the scars of that night still burn. The murders on Elm Street in Dayton, Ohio, were not just a story of 2 lives lost. They were a window into how jealousy, secrecy, and betrayal can spiral into unimaginable violence. At its core, this was a tale of obsession, a husband who could not let go, a secret relationship that ended in tragedy, and a deputy who crossed the line from protector to predator. But beyond the crime itself, the Elm Street case forced an entire community and a justice system to confront unsettling truths. How could a sworn officer of the law become complicit in such brutality? What safeguards were missing that allowed his darkness to go unnoticed? And most importantly, how can society ensure that those who wear the badge are beyond reproach? The reforms that followed in Dayton, stricter oversight, psychological screenings, and tighter accountability, were born out of the ashes of that house fire. They serve as reminders that institutions must remain vigilant, because trust in law enforcement is fragile, and once broken, it may never fully return. For neighbors on Elm Street, the memories linger. Every boarded-up window, every whispered story keeps the horror alive. But in remembering, there is also resilience. The community came together not only to mourn the lives of Rachel Miller and Thomas Green, but to demand a future where such betrayal could never happen again. In the end, the story of Elm Street is more than a crime. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked jealousy, the corruption of power, and the devastating cost when the people we rely on protect us become the very monsters we fear. Because evil does not always come in the shadows. Sometimes it wears a familiar face and carries a badge. In Dayton, Ohio, 2 brutal murders on Elm Street uncover a twisted tale of jealousy, betrayal, and a deputy's shocking fall from grace. 2 lives lost, a deputy's betrayal, a community scarred forever. Police Scarlight, what do you think about the Elm Street case? Should law enforcement be held to stricter accountability? When crimes like this happen, do you believe justice was truly served? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'll be reading every one. Let's discuss how cases like this change not only the victims' families, but entire communities. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss the next true crime story.